I'm 90 years old, and I spent 15 years of my life apologizing to my children for simply existing. Every holiday they didn't come, I told myself I must have said something wrong. Every unanswered call, I replayed the last conversation looking for the mistake. I kept making myself smaller, quieter, easier, thinking if I just asked for less, they would give more. My name is Louise, and I know what that kind of guilt does to a woman. It doesn't bring your children closer. It hollows you out quietly, one holiday at a time. The more I tried to deserve their visits, the longer the silences became. If you've ever sat by the window on Thanksgiving waiting for a car to pull up, this is for you. If you've ever apologized for wanting to be seen, this is for you. What I'm about to tell you changed everything, not because my children started visiting more, but because I finally stopped needing them to. If you've ever felt guilty when your children didn't call on a holiday, type 1. If you think that guilt is just something we have to accept, type 0. There is a trap that catches almost every mother I've ever known. And it's not one anyone warns you about. Nobody sits you down and says, when your children visit less, you will start believing it's your fault. But that's exactly what happens. You go back through the years. You review conversations. You ask yourself, was I too demanding, too emotional, too present, or maybe not present enough? You build a quiet case against yourself, brick by brick, and you don't even realize you're doing it. Many of us were raised to believe that a mother's worth is measured by how much her family needs her. We gave our best years to that idea. We showed up. We sacrificed. We stayed. So when the family we built begins to drift, even naturally, even normally, something inside tells us we must have failed somewhere. Let me tell you about a woman named Dorothy. Dorothy is 78, sharp, funny, the kind of woman who still tends a vegetable garden and remembers every grandchild's birthday without writing it down. By any measure, she was a good mother. But every year when the holidays came and her son's family sent a card instead of making the drive, Dorothy would sit down at her kitchen table and do something that broke my heart when she told me about it. She kept a list. A mental list of every moment she thought she might have pushed him away. The time she said the wrong thing at his wedding. The year she couldn't afford to fly out for Christmas. The argument they had about his first house that she still didn't fully understand. She would go through that list every November like it was homework, looking for the answer, trying to find the sentence she could take back, the mistake she could fix retroactively, as if guilt were a kind of repair. And here is what I told her when she finally shared it with me. Dorothy, that list is not keeping you connected to your son. It's keeping you imprisoned in a story that isn't even true. Her son loved her. He was busy. He had a job that demanded too much and a wife who dealt with her own complicated family and 2 children who seemed to need everything at once. His absence in November was not a verdict. It was a calendar. But guilt doesn't let you see calendars. Guilt makes you see verdicts. Here's what I've come to understand after all these years. Guilt is not evidence of failure. It's evidence that you care deeply, but that you've aimed that care at the wrong question. The question is never, what did I do wrong? The question is, what story am I telling myself, and is it actually true? Dorothy didn't fail her son. She raised him. She showed up for decades before he had the language to tell her what that meant. And now he was living the kind of overscheduled, underlived life that their whole generation seems to be living. That is not a reflection of her worth. It is a reflection of the world he is moving through. When she finally heard that, really heard it, something changed in her face. Not relief exactly, more like the quiet that comes after a long noise finally stops. Guilt is not proof that you failed. It's proof that you cared too much about the wrong measurement. But here is the part nobody talks about. The guilt itself, not the distance, not the missed holidays, not the unanswered calls. The guilt is what does the real damage, because guilt doesn't sit still. It moves. It pushes you into behavior that feels like love but functions like pressure. And pressure, no matter how softly it's applied, eventually pushes people away. I want to tell you about a friend of mine named Ruth. Ruth is 75, warm, generous, the kind of woman who remembers how her grandchildren take their tea. When her daughter moved across the country for work, Ruth handled it the way many of us would. She told herself it was fine. She told her daughter it was fine. And then she spent the next 3 years proving, through sheer volume, that she was not going anywhere. She texted every morning, "Good morning, thinking of you." She sent articles about things her daughter might find interesting. She called on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and sometimes Sundays, just to check in, just to hear her voice, just to make sure the connection was still there. And when her daughter replied with short answers, "Fine, busy, talk soon," Ruth didn't hear busyness. She heard distance, so she reached out more. What Ruth didn't know, and what her daughter eventually told her in a very difficult phone call, was this. Every time the phone rang and she saw her mother's name, she felt a small, familiar weight settle on her chest. Not because she didn't love Ruth. She loved her deeply, but she had come to associate those calls with obligation, with the unspoken knowledge that if she didn't answer, her mother would worry, that if she kept the call short, her mother would feel rejected. The relationship had slowly, without either of them intending it, become a source of tension instead of comfort. That is what guilt does when you let it drive. It doesn't just live inside you. It transmits. The people you love can feel the weight behind your words, even when your words are perfectly kind. They can hear the need beneath just calling to say hi. They can sense when a simple text is not simple at all. And over time, they begin to brace themselves, not because they don't care, because they do care, and caring takes energy, and energy is something that most middle-aged adults are already running short on. Every time you reach out from guilt, you are teaching your children to associate you with obligation, not joy. You are not doing it on purpose. You are doing it because you love them and you are afraid. But the effect is the same. I know this is hard to hear. I know because I did the same thing for years. I thought closeness was something you could achieve through effort, through frequency, through enough check-ins and enough softness, and enough not asking for too much. I was wrong. Closeness is not manufactured. It is felt. And it cannot be felt when the other person is quietly managing the weight of your anxiety every time they pick up the phone. When you shrink yourself to keep them close, you lose the very person they once loved to visit. If guilt has ever made you reach out more than you truly wanted to, type 1. If you found a way to sit with the silence without letting it pull you under, type 0. I want to be honest with you about something, even if it's not what the guilt in your chest wants to hear. Your children's lives are genuinely hard. I don't say that to excuse them. I don't say it to tell you your feelings don't matter. I say it because I spent too many years watching the distance through my own lens, measuring their absence against my needs, without ever really looking at what their days actually looked like. I know what you're thinking. We managed, we raised children and held jobs and kept houses and showed up for our own parents. We did all of that without making our children feel guilty for living their lives, And that's true. You did. But the world your children are moving through is not the world you moved through, and I think it's worth saying that plainly. Let me tell you about someone I know, a woman named Carol. Carol is 44. She has 2 children, 9 and 6. She works full-time at a job that follows her home on her phone. Her husband travels for work every other week. She lives 4 hours from her mother, which means a visit is not an afternoon, it is a production. It requires scheduling and coordination, and someone to cover the dog, and 2 children who will spend the entire drive asking how much longer, and a Monday morning at work that doesn't care how tired she is. Carol loves her mother. She thinks about her mother often. She saves articles she wants to share with her. She means to call more. But her days begin before light and end after dark, and somewhere in the middle she is trying to keep 4 people fed and present and not completely exhausted. Her mother, and I say this gently because her mother is a good woman, sees the gaps between visits and fills them with a story about not being a priority, about being slowly set aside, about a relationship that is fading. But Carol is not fading from her mother. Carol is drowning in her own life and doing her best to stay afloat. Here is the painful truth at the center of this. 2 people can love each other genuinely and still feel unseen by each other. Her mother sees the empty chair at the holiday table. Carol sees the last 3 calls she made before work that went straight to voicemail. Both of them feel like they are giving what they can. Both of them feel like it isn't landing. When you look at the distance between you and your children through only your own eyes, you see absence. When you try, even just once, to look through theirs, you often see someone who is exhausted and stretched thin and carrying more than they let on. This does not mean you stop wanting more. You are allowed to want more. But there is a difference between want and verdict. There is a difference between I miss them, which is true and human and right, and they don't care about me, which in most cases is simply not true. Their absence is not a verdict. It is a circumstance. Learn the difference, and it will cost you less. I want to tell you about the moment things changed for me. It was my 87th birthday. My daughter had called 2 weeks before to say she wasn't going to make it. Work, the children, the usual tangle of reasons that I had learned by then were real, even if they still stung. I told her it was fine. And then I sat with that for 2 weeks, half convinced it wasn't fine, half convinced there was something I should do or say to change it. But on the morning of my birthday, I did something different. I didn't call. I didn't text. I made my coffee. I carried it out to the back step, and I sat there listening to the neighborhood wake up. Birds. A car starting somewhere down the street. The specific silence of early morning that has always felt to me like the world taking a breath before it begins. And somewhere in that quiet, I noticed something. I was actually fine. Not performing fine. Not pretending fine. Actually, genuinely, surprisingly fine. That was the morning I began to understand the difference between loving my children and making my happiness dependent on their schedules. Those are not the same thing. I had been treating them as if they were for years, and it had cost me more mornings than I can count. Let me tell you about a neighbor of mine named Eleanor. Eleanor turned 72 the year her youngest moved to another state. Instead of letting the empty calendar become an accusation, she filled it deliberately. She joined a small book group that met on Wednesday evenings. She started walking every morning, not for her health, though that improved too, but because she found she liked the solitude of it, the rhythm of it, the way it made her feel like herself. She started taking a watercolor class at the community center, which she was terrible at and loved completely. Her children noticed, not right away, but within a few months, something shifted in their conversations. Their mother wasn't waiting for them anymore. She had things to tell them about. She had opinions about her book group and small victories with her painting and observations from her morning walks. She had, in some way they couldn't fully name, become more interesting to call. And then something happened that Eleanor described to me with a quiet kind of wonder. Her daughter started asking to visit, not out of obligation, not on a holiday schedule. Just, "Can I come this weekend, Mom? I could use the time." That is the paradox I want you to sit with. The less you need your children's visits to feel whole, the more they tend to want to come. Not because you became someone different, because you became more fully yourself. You are not a waiting room between their visits. You are a life that is happening right now. Love them with everything you have, and then go live, not because they're not coming, but because your life is worth living regardless. Love them fully, and live fully, with or without their visits on your calendar. This morning I woke up, made my coffee, and sat by the window watching the street come alive. A woman walking her dog, two children waiting for the school bus, looking at their shoes, the slow, ordinary beauty of a morning that belongs entirely to me. My daughter called at noon. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing important, a show she had been watching, something funny her youngest said, a question about a recipe I made years ago that she suddenly wanted to try. It was a good call. Easy. The kind of call that feels like a conversation between two people who enjoy each other rather than a check-in between two people who feel obligated. But here is what I want you to know. Even if she hadn't called, the morning would still have been beautiful. That is new. That took me a long time to get to, and I believe you can get there too. Here is what I have learned, slowly, imperfectly, over more years than I care to count. Guilt is not love. It is love's anxious shadow, and it does not serve you. The distance between you and your children, when it exists, is rarely about failure. It is usually about the particular difficulty of adult life, the kind of exhaustion that makes even the people we love most feel far away sometimes. When you stop measuring love by visits logged and calls returned, something opens up, not overnight, not without grief, but slowly the space that guilt was occupying becomes available for something else, for quiet mornings and honest conversations and the small, underrated pleasure of your own company. You spent decades caring for everyone else. You showed up when it was hard and stayed when it would have been easier to leave. You loved people through their worst and celebrated their best and absorbed more than anyone fully knows. That life has weight and worth and meaning, independent of whether your children are sitting at your table on a Thursday in November. You are not a waiting room. You are a life, a full, weathered, still unfolding life, and the most important thing you can do with whatever time you have left is live it, not in anticipation of the next visit, not in review of the last one, but right here, in the morning that is actually in front of you. I cannot promise that choosing peace will make your children visit more. I can tell you that it changed the quality of every conversation I've had since I stopped reaching from guilt. I can tell you that Eleanor's daughter drives 4 hours now just to sit in her kitchen on a Saturday. I can tell you that Ruth eventually learned to put the phone down, and the calls that followed were different, lighter, easier, wanted. Stop waiting for permission to feel whole. You are not a mother in waiting. You are a woman still living, and that is enough. If this reached something you've been carrying quietly, stay with me. I'll be here, still learning, still choosing peace, still figuring out what it means to grow old on my own terms. If something I said today felt true for you, if you've taken a step toward your own peace, however small, please leave a like. And if you know another woman who needs to hear this, share it with her. She may not know she's been waiting for it. Tell me, have you found your own peace apart from your children's visits? Type 1 if yes. I would love to hear your story. Type 0 if you're still working on it. That's okay too. So am I.